Hello, my name's Dan and I'm here today to talk to you about writing music. That was the opening to Carry On Shaun, which is one of the pieces I wrote for the Wallace and Gromit show. And I thought I would talk to you about how I wrote it and the processes involved in writing it. But first, I'm going to show you the score and what it looks like and how do you read a score. So at the beginning of the score, there's a list of all the instruments that are playing. So there's a flute, a piccolo, an oboe. There's a clarinet in A, a bass clarinet in B flat and a bassoon. Then there's two French horns, two trumpets, a trombone and a tuba. And then we have drum kit, percussion, and then we have a harp and a piano, and you'll notice that those two instruments have two lines of music, or two staves, and that's because they need one for the right hand and one for the left hand. And then we come on to the strings, the violins 1 and 2, the violas, the cellos and the double basses. On the score it says violoncelli or violoncello and contrabass. That's just a posh way of saying cellos and basses. And now we have the first two and a half pages of the score. And you'll notice that each instrument has its own line of music running horizontally, apart from the harp and piano, as I mentioned before. And if you look at a score, if you just look at this, you might not be able to read music that well, but you can make out various things. Look at the strings at the bottom. So the bottom 5 lines of the score running across, they're the strings. So at the beginning, they look like they're playing long notes, held chords. But then if you go onto the second page and look at the violins, see how busy it suddenly becomes. And that's because the violins are playing very fast, because I wanted to bring a bit of energy into the music, because we're now in the theme. And there's also pizzicato, violas and cellos. Pizzicato means to pluck. And of course the double bass is doing the same thing. It's possible to look at a score without ever having looked at a score before and just find things out for yourself, really. You don't have to be an expert. They're very interesting things to look at, especially when you're listening to music. I wanted the beginning of Carry On Shaun I wanted the music to convey morning time, the sun rising, getting out of bed, getting ready, and the sort of the calm before the storm, really, before all the madness begins. And there's a very famous piece of music by a Norwegian composer called Edvard Grieg, and it's called Morning. It's beautiful music, it's just very still. And I just thought it'd be very appropriate for the Shaun the Sheep montage. And so I've sort of stolen it. Well, sort of. I've used a few notes and I've changed it to suit the film. I don't think he'd mind me using it though, because, well, he died in 1907. So now we come to the main theme. We've had the introduction, which is nice and quiet, and now the main theme is very upbeat and it contrasts very nicely with it. I wasn't allowed to use the actual Shaun the Sheep theme. I think there was some copyright issues there. So I had to write my own version of the theme. I had to be very careful not to steal any of the ideas of the Shaun the Sheep theme. So I wrote something with a similar beat and the same sort of style, you know, that feeling of cheekiness that you would expect from Shaun the Sheep. But the melody is completely different, but hopefully I've managed to capture the sort of essence of Shaun the Sheep. The reason I called this piece Carry On Shaun was after the Carry On films that I used to love as a child. The Carry On films were a series of films made in I think the 50s, 60s and 70s. And to be honest, they haven't aged particularly well, and I don't think you would find them that funny right now. But I've always loved the music, and this music is reminiscent of that type of thing. And I think what makes it funny is the combination of instruments that is used. For example, there's the xylophone and the violins playing the tune together. That gives it a light, carefree sort of feel. And then using extremes as well. So, for example, the tuba and the piccolo, if you get those playing together and playing the same tune, it sounds so ridiculous. It's quite funny. Another effect is using muted trumpets. Now, you all know what a trumpet sounds like, but if you stick a mute in the end of it, then suddenly it sounds like this, which is quite funny. So I've used some muted trumpets and muted trombones as well, which is the same effect, but lower. And then you should never forget the king of all comedy instruments, which of course is the bassoon. So we've got another change of mood here. I've stepped it up a gear. We've got more of a beat in the drums. You'll hear the piccolo and the muted trumpets. The xylophone is still playing. I think the xylophone gives a sort of cheeky quality to it. And when I was watching Shaun the Sheep, he's got that cheekiness about him, hasn't he? He's always getting into trouble. One interesting thing about writing music for this montage is normally when you're asked to write music for a film, the filmmaker will send you the finished film, and then the composer, that's me, will sit down, probably watch it 100 times, get some ideas, and then slowly write the music to suit the movement and the mood of the film. Now this time, I was asked to write the music first, and then the creators of Shaun the Sheep, they're Aardman, they created the montage around the music. Now that's very unusual. So I had to imagine what was going on while I was writing the music rather than reacting to what I was seeing. When I was watching Shaun the Sheep, one thing I noticed was the amount of military precision planning that went into all these raids and adventures that they had. And there was one scene where he has a huge blackboard and he has all the diagrams on and they're all crowded around. It's a bit like something out of an old war movie. And so I wanted the music to reflect that. So you'll hear the side drum playing just as if it's in the distance, almost as if there's an army in the distance sort of coming towards you. And then I just used the sort of instruments you would find in a military band. So piccolos, these piccolos and clarinets and trumpets and French horns, those sort of things. So that's how I got this effect. And to contrast with that, I've brought the strings in and I've just warmed it up, and I wanted to make it feel a lot more sentimental, really. And you'll notice that I've used the word contrast quite a lot. And I think in this sort of music, the sort of comedy music, contrasts is very important. So the contrast between a tuba and a piccolo, just using extremes really. And I'll probably continue to use the word contrast as well. So I apologise. I think what makes this music quite effective is I've introduced a swing beat. So rather than the usual sort of 1, 2, 1, 2 marching beats, now we've got a sort of do, jack, go do, jack, go do, jack. It's really laid back, man. That sort of beat, you know. And I've got a very heavy bass. So I've got the tuba going dum, dum, dum. And I suppose it's supposed to sound quite cool, or it would have done in its time, but I think it contrasts really well with what they've put on the screen, which is the farmer, and he's unconscious or he's asleep, and he's all dressed up, and he's got goggles and a snorkel, and they're washing him or they're putting him through a car wash or something. And anyway, he looks completely ridiculous. And I think the contrast between that and this sort of cool, laid back kind of music works really well. So now we come back to the theme to end the piece. And it's a good idea sometimes to end with the theme that you started with. It just gives the piece some structure and just the feeling of completion, really. So that's what I've done. And I hope you found this talk informative and interesting. And if not, then I hope you enjoy looking at this Wallace and Gromit statue of me in the background. Anyway, it's been really nice talking to you, and perhaps we'll speak again one day. Okay.